Hello everybody. In this video we are going to ask the question, was the person you were with, were they a borderline or were they a narcissist? Did they suffer from borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, or were they what's called comorbid, where they had both at the same time? This can be a really vexing question when you're in the relationship, and people ask this question even long after they've gotten out of the relationship. But I'm going to express to you what is really going on first with your question. Why do you ask this? Why do you want to know? Especially if you're out of the relationship. The relationship is over. You were horrifically hurt. It was a dramatic, chaotic, painful experience. Why aren't you just simply going, well, man, good riddance to that. I'm going to move on and do better things. Why are you still asking these kinds of questions about a relationship that is no longer going on? We'll answer that question. But first, let's take a look at what you've either been told and or what you have come to assume about borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. So you are of the belief that borderline personality disorder is a mental illness that is a response to trauma, and borderlines, because of their trauma as infants, they have a tremendous fear of abandonment. And so what you've been told to believe, what you've learned to believe, is that as a result of the intimacy, the borderline becomes afraid, and in order to avoid the pain they think they're going to get from you discarding them, they discard you first in a very psychopathic, hurtful way. You've been led to believe that somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder suffered from the same kind of trauma, but that they have a firewall between their true self and the fake, narcissistic, pathological person that they present to the world. So you have made the determination that borderline, there's hope there. Narcissistic personality disorder, there's no hope. The narcissist is out to destroy you and hurt you and can never be trusted. The borderline, on the other hand, really wants to connect and wants to be loved, but they have this pesky thing that makes them split on you, and it's a mistake, and if they could just see past the mistake, and if they could just love you, it would all be okay. And so when the relationship ends, you look back on it and you remember the good times, and you go, ah, yes, the borderline, they can be so loving and pure. And then you remember the bad times and you go, ah, yes, that was very hurtful, that seemed very psychopathic and narcissistic. And then you think to yourself, ah, maybe it was a lie the whole time. Maybe the whole time that person really was manipulating me and lying to me and setting me up just to enjoy hurting me. And then you say, ah, so I was with a narcissist the whole time. And then you bounce back and forth between the two. Well, this is very common. First off, just know if this is you, this is extremely common. I think I had that experience. I think everybody who gets enmeshed with a cluster B has an experience similar to this. So do not judge yourself for having the feeling. It's very normal. It's your brain is trying to figure out. This is the cognitive dissonance. If you're asking this question, you are in what's called cognitive dissonance. It means that you're trying to find meaning and something rational so that your brain can hang on to that, because you feel like you're going to go crazy if you don't figure it out. Right? So nobody asks this question casually, really. This question is never asked casually. You know, when people are not in cluster B relationships and things break up, there will be times when they wonder, I wonder if that person really loved me, you know, that kind of stuff. But they really don't. At some point they go, you know what, it was just a bad relationship and I'm done with it. I can remember for my marriage breaking up. You know, I was with somebody for 10 years, married for 4, and we got divorced. And, it had the normal, all the pain and everything. But, I look back on it and I don't even remember a whole hell of a lot what happened. And it just wasn't good. We weren't a good fit. Yeah, she did things I didn't like, but, I probably wasn't the best partner for her either. There's really no cognitive dissonance there for me. I don't even know who did what when. I don't really care. Borderline, you care. You want to know. Were they a borderline or were they a narcissist? Did they really love me or did they not? So it's really important when I get to the question, I'm going to answer the question. But before we get to that, it's really important to understand that what's most important about that question is that you're not finished. There's still some healing that needs to be done with you. It means you're still attached. If you're asking the question, was the person I'm with, were they borderline? Were they narcissist? Were they comorbid? Did they really love me? If you're asking this question, it means you're still attached to them and you still unconsciously want them back. And this is a dangerous place to be because you are prime target to be hoovered back into the relationship. If that doesn't happen, you are a prime target for another borderline or another narcissist, and you will end up manifesting one or the other if you don't resolve this question. It means that you need to do the 3 things that I tell you to do. If you click the join button at the super empath level or above, you will hear the 3 things I teach you to do, which is number 1, you have to be in therapy. Number 2, you need to be working the 12 steps, especially the 4th step, and you can do that at coda.org. It's free. 3, you need to be meditating on a daily basis. If you're not doing that every day to the best of your ability, until you resolve the cognitive dissonance, it won't go away. It's not going to go away in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. It will stay. If you're having this question, you think that if I came and told you, oh, yes, by the way, they were a borderline, since you were wondering. I've determined that they were a borderline. That's not going to make you feel better. Then you're going to be asking the question, well, if they were a borderline, that means that they really loved me, and if I could just have convinced them, and then you'll be stuck on wanting to get them to love you again. If I say to you, with my psychic abilities, I've gone back in time into your relationship, and I've determined that your partner was in fact a narcissist. You can now put the question to rest. They never really loved you. They were purely a psychopath. They were manipulating you and using you the whole time. Then you think, well, now I know, of course. Now I feel better, now I know. That's not going to happen. Because no matter what, even if you're after the fact looking back, telling me, as many people do, Mike, you're too kind to them. They really need to be held accountable. I know they have a mental illness, but they did it on purpose. They enjoy doing it. They're manipulative. They just do it for this. They just want to get this out of it. And you have all these judgments about them. That's the same as asking the question. It's just 2 variations. One person will ask the question, did they really love me? Were they borderline or narcissist? Another person, if they're in pain, deeper denial, they're going to say, yep, no, there's nothing good about borderlines. They're just out to hurt you, and they never really loved you. You both still want them back, and you're both still putting a target on your forehead saying, hey, I'm open for cluster B abuse. Come help me as I vainly try to work through my unresolved childhood abandonment issues. So you should know that. Now let's go ahead and look at the questions. So there's a person who came on the channel, and I'm happy that you're here. So please don't feel judged by my analyzing your question. I felt the same way as you did, but I think it's important. It's an important discussion for everybody, because even though people come onto my channel and they watch it a lot, we still keep having to ask the same questions over and over again, and that's okay, because these are questions that are not easily resolved. They're easily answered, but the answer doesn't resolve the problem, and we need to resolve the problem. So this person asks, in response to my video, how the borderline infects you with their mental illness. This person says, when they're projecting onto us that we have no value, do they really feel that we have no value? This is a painful place to be. The real question you're asking, which you don't realize you're asking, but the real question you're asking is, do I have value? This was a question that goes all the way back to your infancy, when your parents treated you as an object that only had value based on what you did for them. You never got the feeling that you had value in and of yourself. And so you walk around with this question all the time. You seek to gain your value by pleasing others or helping others or doing something for other people. And that is why you chose being with a borderline. So I responded to this question. She says, when they're projecting on to us that we have no value, do they really feel that we have no value? My response was, I understand and relate to your question, but you are missing the point. There is no answer to your question that will make you feel better. If I say, yes, they really feel that way, you will be deeply hurt. If I say, no, they are sick, then you will try harder to make them love you and you will be hurt even more. There is no good answer to that question. You are with someone who is emotionally, mentally, and psychologically handicapped. If you can understand that, not just intellectually, but if you can really accept that, you will stop wanting to get them to love you and value you. Your question is coming from your pain and your loneliness. It is coming from your codependence. And then I suggest, work on yourself and stop trying to figure out the borderline. So I say to the person, stop trying to figure out the borderline. So what happens not too long after that? A day later, I get another question from the same person. You're welcome to ask the question. Please don't feel judged for asking. It's just so typical of what we all go through. This person, remember who I said, stop trying to figure out the borderline and work on yourself, then ask the question in response to my video, for borderlines, intimacy is kryptonite. Trying to go deep kills the relationship. This person asks again, at any point in your recovery process, did you wonder if she might be a narcissist? I bounce back and forth between the two, BPD and narcissism with my ex-borderline. But I suspect there are a lot of overlaps since they are both cluster Bs, etc., etc. So to answer your question, did I ever wonder in my recovery process? That's a great way to ask that question. Yes, I did. I did because I didn't understand fully what borderline personality disorder was. This is the most painful part. The most painful part of being with a borderline is the hope that they could love you, or worse, that they could have loved you. What could have happened if they had let me in? What could have happened if I were more able to show them enough love? If I had just shown them enough love that would have convinced them they were safe, what could have happened then? That's the most painful part. So again, you're asking this question out of pain. You're in a lot of pain. So I don't know how long you've been on my channel, but again, the 3 things that I recommend you do are essential. And if you do these 3 things, you won't ask this question. Those 3 things are therapy, 12 steps, daily meditation. If you don't do, that may not be the only way to heal, but that's the only way I know. If you don't do that and resolve that relationship issue, it will never go away. And you will put a target on your head and you will find another borderline or a narcissist. Now, to get to the question, how can you tell if your partner is or was, if it's an ex-partner, how can you tell if they were a borderline or a narcissist? Well, that question has some assumptions which are turning out to be inaccurate. As more time goes on and more research is being done, the latest psychological opinions, as I understand it, is that borderline personality disorder is a form of narcissistic personality disorder. That borderlines are actually secondary narcissists, covert narcissists. Covert does not mean a narcissist who's hiding behind a fake personality of kindness. Ha 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 ha. It means that it is a secondary expression. Their primary expression is the borderline. The secondary expression, which cannot be separated, is the psychopathic narcissist, which is why borderlines are called secondary psychopaths. Narcissists, people that have NPD, are the exact same thing, except that they are primary narcissists, secondary borderlines, I guess. Sam Vaknin has also called borderlines failed narcissists. So they are narcissists. There's not a difference. You're asking this question because in your mind, if she was a borderline, there was hope. Even though intellectually you've heard me say there's no hope, you still think there is hope because you want to make the distinction between the borderline and the narcissist. You also, this goes back to your earlier question of, did they really think that you had no value? So this really isn't about trying to figure them out. It's trying to figure out if you have value, if you are lovable. Because in your mind, if you can make them a borderline, then you can tell yourself, I was lovable, they did love me, but they have this mental illness that forces them to reject you. Okay, you think that's going to make you feel better, but it's not. As I said before, all that's going to make you do is want to go and make them love you, which they can't. That's your delusion. Your delusion the whole time was that if you just loved them enough, they would love you back. And you do that for a very selfish reason. Your narcissistic reason is, as you have said in your question, and I'm not judging you for having narcissism, we all have it. In fact, it's necessary to have narcissism in order to function. But your narcissism in this case was that what you want is you want your parents to wake up, turn around and say, you have value in and of yourself. You, just because you exist, you have intrinsic value and you don't have to do anything for me to love you. You just have to exist. You want the borderline to do that. And the reason why you chose a borderline to tell you that you have love and value in and of yourself is because the borderline's unreachability stimulates within you your original situation of being discarded as a child. You felt unloved and you felt unworthy and you felt that your value came from what you did, not from who you were. That's all wrapped up in the question of, first off, did they really not value me? And it's also wrapped up in the question, was the person I was with a borderline or a narcissist? So again, borderline and narcissism are both forms of narcissism. Your question is very similar to a past question I got, which I love repeating because it's very, very, it's just such a typical thought process that we go through in our ruminating, in our cognitive dissonance, which is a form of basically you're going crazy. This question will drive you crazy, by the way. You should stop asking it. But that question is, somebody asked me, hey, Mike, I'm making real progress with my borderline. And I want to know, how can I keep the borderline from splitting on me so that I can continue to make progress with the borderline in her and keep the narcissist part of her out? The assumption of that process is that the borderline is the real self and the psychopathic part of her that splits on him is some other part that's not really her. And if we can just cut that part out and pull it out, then I can work on continuing to make progress with the borderline and get them to love me. But it doesn't understand what borderline personality disorder is, and it shows your narcissistic projection. So what codependents do is they narcissistically project themselves onto borderlines. And this is what causes the cognitive dissonance. Because when you look at the borderline, you don't see somebody that has a form of narcissistic personality disorder. You see a child that was never given love, that needs to be told that they have value, that needs to be given security, that needs to be just totally completely flooded with unconditional love so that they can finally let go of the pain and feel okay. That's what you want for yourself. You are projecting it onto the borderline in sort of like, sympathetic magic. And people take out dolls and they either put curses on them, which you could put a love spell on the doll and then it'll happen to the other person. You're really trying to do that to yourself. So every moment that you are with tears in your eyes and your heart bursting with love and you're loving the borderline and telling them how much you love them or being there for them or being understanding for them, you are trying to love somebody that isn't there. You're trying to give to them what you want yourself. And you're hoping that once that gets in there, you will have healed them, which means that you will have healed yourself. And then, of course, they'll turn around and become the parent, and then they'll love you unconditionally. This is really what you want. You want to heal the child within yourself and the other person, and then you want to be the borderline and step back and project onto them to be the perfect loving parent. Because isn't that what you experienced when they were first love bombing you? You experienced the perfect unconditional loving parent who loved you. I mean, I can remember that I literally could do no wrong. There was nothing wrong with me. Everything that I saw in myself as a flaw, or that anybody else might even see as a flaw, was actually the perfect thing she was looking for. She was looking for a guy almost 20 years older than her. She was looking for a guy that was bald. She was looking for a guy that was muscular but maybe could stand to lose, 10 pounds or so. She was looking for all of those things that actually made me unattractive to women her age. But for her, it was perfect. She saw in me all kinds of things that might have driven other people away, but for her, it was exciting. I could do no wrong. I was perfect in her eyes. And what was happening was she was allowing me to regress and project onto her, oh, look, mommy sees me and loves me exactly for who I am. So that's what you're wanting. You are wanting them to first off allow you to fix them, because if you fix them, it means that you can be fixed. This is important. The reason why it's so important for you to fix your borderline is because if you can fix them, it means you can be fixed. As I've said earlier, codependents don't have a personality disorder, but they were on the verge. So if the borderline is a failed narcissist, meaning this is a child who went through trauma and was in the process of creating the false identity so that they could protect themselves and they failed at it, the codependent was in the process of creating themselves into be a borderline, where they had a psychopathic, protective person inside of them and the vulnerable side. And you were afraid that you were going to go crazy. You felt yourself losing your sanity. You felt yourself losing your grip, and you're stuck. You never really lost it. You never really became somebody with a personality disorder, but you're right on the verge, which is why you can totally understand them. Because when you look at the borderline, you see where you almost went, and you are trying desperately to go back in the past and save yourself and pull yourself back from the brink so that you won't lose your mind. All right? That's why it causes such anxiety within you when you see them in that state of vacillating back and forth between loving and hating. You see how much pain they're in, and you see how they're number one, you see the torture that they're going through, but you also see that they're beyond, they've gone on the other side, to the dark side, and because of where they are, they'll never get love. You see that, and you're trying to save yourself. So your question of BPD versus narcissism, number one, is wrong, because borderline personality disorder is narcissism. You can't separate the two. You can't fix the borderline and expel the narcissist. That's what you want, because you think if you can do that, then your borderline will love you, which again is about you wanting mom to love you. You want to make the borderline go from a completely malformed identity to a fully formed identity in one shot. What you want to do is to heal them and then go, okay, fine, I healed you. Now you turn around and heal me. I don't have time for you to be a little hurt child anymore. Take care of me now. You don't see that, but that's what you're expecting. Which is probably why if the borderline were to magically turn around and get healthy, you would discard them, even though you're not borderline. Anyway, that's the whole point, is that if you can get past the realization that you're projecting onto them, because if you see them for who they really are, if you truly see the borderline as somebody who has a mental illness that is inescapable for them to be narcissistic, if you see them as narcissistic, if you see them as people who have a form of narcissistic personality disorder and you accept that, you will no longer want them to love you. If you do see that and you still want them to love you, which is a very real possibility, it means that you haven't healed your wound. It means you are emotionally regressed at that state when you were an infant or a toddler wondering, why doesn't mommy love me? I have value. Doesn't she see that I deserve to be loved just because I'm here? And you didn't get that, and that question never got resolved, and you're taking it here. And that's what your narcissism is, that when reality says to you, this person doesn't love you the way you want, they never can love you the way you want, you say, I don't believe that. Mommy must be able to love me. I refuse to accept that. If I accept that, I'll die. So this is why you have such resistance to the idea that they can never love you, that there's no hope. This is why, after the fact, you hold on to the feeling of rage and injustice at them. They need to be held accountable. They need to understand what they did to me. Because you don't see them for who they truly are. When you work the 12 steps, what's going to happen when you get to step 4, especially in my experience, is you're going to take a look at your expectations, and you're going to then see that your expectations were unrealistic and were based in your very understandable narcissism. And when you can see that, you were projecting on them the whole time, not because I told you and you're intellectually putting it in your brain, but when you can actually work through it, feel the pain, and then go through the disappointment of not ever getting the love you wanted from this person, which is like your parents, you will have healed a piece of that part. The relationship will then be healed. You will no longer be in pain about the relationship, and you will be one step further to fully healing that inner child that you're working so hard to heal. Does that make sense? So your question, the fact that you asked me 2 versions of the same question, means that you still haven't worked through that relationship and tied it back to your parents. And again, intellectually isn't enough. You've got to work that 4th step. You've got to go in and write that inventory of resentments and look at your part. And that can only be done with pen to paper with a sponsor. You can't do it in your head. These videos are a great resource, but they're not going to fix the problem. This channel is primarily to motivate you to go do the work. That's why I keep hammering away. Therapy, 12 steps, meditation. And why I say, if you come onto my channel and you hear me say that and you don't do the work, I can't have any sympathy for you. I have empathy for you. I can feel how painful it is for you, but I can't have any sympathy for you because I've given you the key. You unfortunately have to go do the work. If you don't do the work, if you don't take the pill, you can't get the cure. So I welcome the questions, but do the work first. Stop trying to figure them out and stop just watching my videos. Actually go to CODA, go to therapy, and get it all worked out. And you won't be able to get rid of the codependence. It'll always be there to some degree. You can heal by degrees, and you can have loving, healthy relationships. You can enjoy just being with yourself, and you can be completely healed of that painful relationship. You can look back on that relationship without any pain whatsoever. You know, what's interesting is that, I mean, when I was with my borderline, it destroyed me. You can go back to the early videos and you can see how destroyed I was. But what's interesting is that I've already forgotten about it. You know, I think about my fiance who passed away. I still mourn that. But I don't think about the borderline. I mean, if I didn't do this channel, I'd forget. Do you want to be in that place where you can realize that this was just a superficial experiment on my part to try and fix my unconscious issues? Do you want to be able to get to the place where you have to remind yourself, oh yeah, that's right, I was with that borderline. Yeah, I remember I was in a lot of pain about that. Yeah. Anyway, I totally forgot about that. Do you want to get to that place? Do those 3 things. Don't do those 3 things, and you can stay in that state of asking that question and the pain associated with that question forever, and you'll have a target. And some other borderline or some other narcissist very likely will come and find you. And then you'll get to live it all over again. All right? That's it for me. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you when I see you.